Sonic the Hedgehog is a franchise that's been in my life for about as long as I can remember. I played the Genesis games when I was young, I watched the cartoons, and played some other releases here and there. But with the third Sonic movie and Shadow Generations on the horizon, I realized that I never actually experienced many of the mainline Sonic games before. So I figured I might as well stream each and every Sonic game that is available for me to stream, to get a fresh and complete experience of the entire mainline Sonic franchise. Afterwards I decided to summarize my opinions on each game in this little video. This isn't a complete analysis of every single game, I merely addressed the points I think I had something notable to say about. I hope you can get something out of this, and more so, I hope you enjoy it. It's been a few years since I last played Sonic the Hedgehog 1, and I could only remember it as a game that in comparison to the later ones hadn't aged that well. But in my most recent playthrough I didn't even notice that many flaws, just a bunch of positives. It's a lot more fun than I remember, it holds up with Sonic the Hedgehog 2, it plays very tightly, and the level design wasn't as egregious as I thought. If there's one thing to actively complain about it, is that even as iconic as the zones are, their themes aren't all that different. The first three are more nature-ish, ancient temple-like, the later three are heavily industrialized areas. During gameplay they feel different enough, but I just wish there would have been a bit more variety. One thing I realized is that the game is a lot easier than I ever thought it was. Even the most infamous labyrinth zone was beaten more or less effortlessly. I believe the common fear of water levels in video games mostly stems from the fact that many people played them as children. I mean, even I remember having trouble with labyrinth zone, but this time I don't even think I heard the drowning music. There isn't too much to say about it. It's Sonic the Hedgehog 1, one of the most iconic video games of all time. Like, what do you want me to say? It's aged well for what it is, and it's a neat little 60-minute adventure that I can see myself playing more often now that I found a new appreciation for this game. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is a game that is much more dear to me. I distinctly remember playing it on my phone in the schoolyard in like 5th grade. I'm pretty sure it's the first Sonic game I ever played and finished, and I've always loved it. I think it's safe to say that it improved on the original in every way imaginable. The zones have more variety in their themes this time, which is aided by the fact that from this point on most Sonic games only have 2 acts per zone, which really makes the zones feel not stale. The sprite is also more detailed and very beautiful at times. I always remember Sonic 2 being a lot longer and more difficult than it actually felt in my most recent playthrough, but I don't consider that a bad thing. It's just as long as Sonic the Hedgehog 1. I actually think I had more fun with it this time than I ever did before. I even like the Metropolis zone, so take that as you will. The boss fights are also more intricate, and I am especially fond of the way Robotnik has different vehicles in each boss fight. The finale of the game has a great cinematic feel to it, with a few charming in-game cutscenes that help tell the story, which is something they only improved upon in Sonic 3. This game was a great continuation of the first game and only a sign of things to come. Sonic CD. It's a weird one, and it has that reputation rightfully. It doesn't play like the other Sonic games. Sonic CD is a lot more exploration based. Playing it like you do Sonic 1 and 2 by just rushing to the end makes it come and go without much impact. Granted, rushing through it is gonna make it clock in about an hour, just as Sonic 1 and 2, so it's somewhat the same length, but that's not really the point of the game. In Sonic CD you can travel through time, an incredibly ambitious feature for its time, and its execution is surprisingly good. See, traveling through time requires crossing one of these poles and going at high speed for a set amount of time, which, due to the very convoluted level design, can be very tricky. Going to the past allows you to destroy some of Robotnik's devices that are hidden in each level. Doing so and traveling to the future allows you to arrive at the good future, where the music and surroundings are all a bit happier. Not saving the past and going to the future will let you arrive in the bad future, where everything is industrial, dirty and roboticized. The system works as intended and is quite interesting if you actually use it, but there's a lack of incentive here in my opinion. For a game where the whole focus is on saving the future, these places do not make it have a huge impact if I happen to arrive at the bad future, because I have a huge issue with the levels in this game. They are weird. The zones in Sonic 2 and Sonic 3 feel alive and thought out like actual places in this world. Sonic CD zones feel more like courses. Bumpers and other objects are placed arbitrarily all over the place. I mean, Collision Chaos is not even the name of a place, it's a descriptor. The last two stages are supposed to be Robotnik spaces, so I'm not even sure if a good future in that sense even makes sense here. Aided by the fact that all 4 versions of the levels are all just industrial but with different color schemes. Some of the earlier stages pull that effect off better by having the past be more tropical and nature-ish, but even then I don't find the actual changes all that interesting from a gameplay perspective. The level design is just much too convoluted, it's not really fun. The boss fights are very unique. Usually in Sonic games you have to hit the boss X amount of times until it dies. Sonic CD makes the boss fights a lot more special. Most of them don't require you to hit Robotnik multiple times, but instead the challenge lies in trying to reach a specific goal, like running on this conveyor belt until Robotnik's platform gets grinded away, reaching the top of this pinball machine, or having to win in a foot race against Metal Sonic. Even if they aren't realized in the best way possible, they make for fun surprises. The final boss is arguably the most normal one of the bunch, and honestly doesn't feel like a final boss at all. Oh yeah, Metal Sonic is here. Or to be clear, he's here. And here. And that's it. Oh, also Amy's here. She's here. And here. That is it also. For the purposes of this video, I consider Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles one entity. It's what it was originally supposed to be like, and it's what it'll always be in my heart. It's always been my favorite of the trilogy and still is to this day. This is the magnum opus of classic Sonic. Everything about this game just pops. The levels, the gameplay, the music. They took the best bits of pieces of the previous 3 Sonic games and created something beautiful. There's a few core changes to the formula. You have different elemental shields now that give you different attributes. The zones generally feel more alive and interactable. And every single act ends with a boss fight now, a change that I especially like. It even has save files. This is the best classic Sonic has ever played. The zones are fun as all hell and intricately designed. They also have a ton of variety, even between acts 1 and 2 most of the time. This makes almost every single act feel unique and makes the game never go stale, even on repeat playthroughs. The zones are huge and have many different routes and secrets, which gives the game a lot of replay value. The art direction of this game is slightly different than in previous Sonic games. Everything pops a whole lot more and is a lot more detailed and colorful, but never too much that it becomes noise like in a certain other game. Sonic has a different sprite as well for some reason, a much improved one if you ask me. It's also the first Sonic game that really bothers to try to tell a story in game, and on top of that the storytelling in this game is absolutely stellar for the norm of the time. It's a direct continuation of the events of Sonic 2. After the final fight against the Defect robot, the Defect crashes on Angel Island, where Robotnik meets Knuckles the Echidna and tricks him into believing Sonic and Tails are the bad guys, while Robotnik prepares to steal the Master Emerald to power and relaunch the Defect. It's nothing too special, but told very nicely in game. I love these little in-game cutscenes and events that are sprinkled throughout the game, that show Robotnik destroying the environment, or how Sonic goes from zone to zone. In Sonic 1 and 2, Robotnik is just kind of hanging out in each zone, waiting to fight you with different vehicles. In this game the bosses have more variety and some actual sense why they are there where they are, like fighting a lumberjack in the foresty Mushroom Hill, or the board computer of the Defect. The music is fantastic as usual and an absolutely bombastic soundtrack for the Genesis. The ending of the game, starting with the Hidden Palace Zone, has a great sense of finality to it. The fight against the new Defect robot is one of the best boss fights in the series, and the true final boss flying through space as Super Sonic in a level called the Doomsday Zone. Bro, nothing could get 12 or 21-year-old me more hyped than this. This is a real final boss fight. Also, Sandopolis is completely overhated. The ghosts didn't even turn bad for me, getting the light switch is super easy, come on people. Knuckles Chaotix. It's the even weirder one. It's not exactly a mainline game, but it can be considered the last game of the classic 2D Sonic series. Also this one is really weird, so let me have this. It's a spin-off for the 32X starring Knuckles and a cast of mostly new characters. Mighty the Armadillo is from an arcade game called Sega Sonic the Hedgehog, but more importantly it introduces Vector, Espio and Charmy, later known as Team Chaotix. The game basically plays like a classic Sonic game, but with a few spins to make it more distinctive and to show off the 32-axis power. Sadly, considering how good Sonic 3 is, most of Chaotix's changes are mostly for the worst. Firstly, you'll always play as two characters, similar to playing as Sonic and Tails in Sonic 2, but this time your two characters are tethered to each other, which allows you to use rubber band physics to gain momentum and height. At least in theory. In practice you usually have to fight with your partner more than anything else. They get stuck or fling you around. Flying all over the place can be damn fun, but usually it's more annoying and disorienting. Secondly, there's 5 zones with 5 acts each, but which zone's next act you play is randomized. Technically it allows your experience to be completely different on each playthrough, but it makes every zone have the same difficulty, and the individuality of each playthrough also doesn't really come to shine since the 5 zones barely have any distinctions among themselves. Sonic 3's level design was incredible. Every zone felt absolutely different and alive with different themes, stage hazards, enemies, vibes and so on. But in Chaotix, each zone feels very samey with barely any distinctive features or enemies. The biggest differences are the color palettes. The level design features no interesting places or set pieces, and you redo the same segments over and over. Lastly, there's way too much going on. The background and foregrounds are filled with so much detail, to the degree that makes the game confusing and unsightly to play. The game was supposed to show off the 32-axis power in displaying 512 different colors at once, and you can tell that they really wanted to show that off. The enemies are barely a threat throughout the game and don't really look or feel fitting to the surroundings, and are reused in most of the zones. I could think of dozens of enemies from previous Sonic games, like the Starfish in Metropolis Zone or the Reefers in Lava Reef. But in Chaotix, none of them even are a smidge memorable or noteworthy. Often they die literal frames after they appear on screen, because the second character just instantly flings into them. Neither the bosses nor the music are anything special either. I like the special stages, for which you get the Chaos Wings, this game's counterpart of the Chaos Emeralds, for which you get the grand reward of this 4-second longer end screen after the final boss. Yeah, that's it. There isn't even an ending cutscene or anything, you just beat the final boss and the game tells you good job and roll credits. Oh, also Metal Sonic is back again, which is cool. This game here has roughly 6 seconds more screen time than in Sonic CD, so good for him. The least you could say about this game is that it's not total garbage. It works in the ways it wants to, but it's nothing special really. It's mid at best and in my opinion a complete waste of time.
Target confirmed.
Here we go, Sonic Adventure, the one that started Sonic's rough transition into 3D. Now, I didn't play this game as a kid, I first played this game on the channel a few months ago, so I have no nostalgic feelings towards this game whatsoever, and I must say, this is literally the coolest thing ever. This is the game that started Sonic's wild era surrounding story and lore. The story is about Dr. Robotnik, henceforth known as Dr. Eggman, resurrecting this water god Chaos and trying to feed it Chaos Emeralds to make it more powerful. You won't make a movie out of this plot, but it works. There are 6 campaigns, each of which following a specific character, that tell bits and pieces of the greater story from their perspectives. The way this is done is brilliant. The characters all have a place in the story, and you see certain events being built up in one that only pay off in another, and it's super fun seeing moments from one story out of context in another story. Yeah, it takes itself a tad serious at times, and it's a problem the Sonic franchise will have to face quite often throughout the 2000s, but they sell it surprisingly well for its time and setting. The 6 characters all have different gameplay styles, and in my opinion they are all super fun. Sonic plays as you expect, you go from place A to place B in a 3D obstacle course, as a very faithful recreation of the classic game's feeling of speed and adventure. Tails is similar, but he can fly and his levels are races against another character. Knuckles has these stages in which he has to find 3 things in a level. Amy's stages are chases where you have to escape from this robot fella called Zero. E102 Gamma, the dark side story of this game, is a robot from Eggman's Legion that has a change of heart. He can shoot projectiles and the stages are timed. And there's Big the Cat, he fishes. I love the variety the different characters bring to the game. A lot of people hate on it for some reason, but I really don't get it. The overworld is the weakest part of the gameplay by far. It's quite small, but more than once I didn't know where I was supposed to go, and the fact that like 50% of the playtime go into running around in the overworld doesn't really help. Most of the boss fights against Eggman and Chaos are pretty good, and the second fight against E101 Beta is an absolute highlight, for gameplay and story reasons, but most importantly for music reasons. The finale against Perfect Chaos, as cool as the lead up to his final form is a bit of a letdown. The final boss is super easy and short, and I was really baffled by the decision to make Open Your Heart the phase 1 song and not the phase 2 song. Yes, the game is clunky and wonky at times, and the camera can be a real pain. In my opinion, it's still a rather reasonable amount of jank for its time though, since this is a very early 3D game from the 90s. Hell, Super Mario 64 has its moments, but you rarely see anyone complain about that. The voice acting and storytelling can be really weird and nonsensical sometimes though. But all of these issues are a product of the time. Imagine a fully fledged ground up remake of this game like a Spyro Reignited or Crash and Sane trilogy. That is a Sonic game I'd be able to pay money for. In my opinion, Sonic Adventure 1 should be admired for its reimagining of this fun little game series about furries and robots into a grand scale multi-layered story that does what it wants to do incredibly well. All in all, I was baffled by the realization that the internet is not always right, and that Sonic Adventure 1 is actually a fantastic game that, in my opinion, holds up incredibly well. If you can look over its admittedly plentiful flaws. Sonic Adventure 2 is a fan favorite and is a sequel to Sonic Adventure. But it's different in that Sonic Adventure 1 had 6 campaigns with 6 different characters. Sonic Adventure 2 has 2 campaigns with teams of 3 that you circle through for each level. These 2 campaigns play parallel to each other from the heroes and villains' perspectives. The story is one of the most iconic ones in Sonic history, with Eggman uncovering government secrets like Shadow the Hedgehog and the Space Colony Arc to try to take over the world. The story takes itself very seriously sometimes, which can be hard to immerse yourself in. I'm not sure if it's because these are talking anthropomorphic animals or because of how wild the story can get, but all in all, the story they are telling here is really cool. Sonic and Shadow stages are the highlights of this game. They've been refined from Sonic's gameplay from Sonic Adventure 1. Knuckles and Rouge's stages, searching for the emerald shards, returned with a few tweaks, and Tails and Eggman stages share a similar gameplay to Gamma stages from Sonic Adventure 1, shooting at enemies and racking up combos. Occasionally the game can be a bit funky with its physics and camera, but I didn't find that it got in the way or lessened the experience very much. I personally really enjoy all 3 gameplay styles, so that's not that big of an issue to me. The finale is probably the most well known one in the Sonic franchise, with the final fight against Final Hazard being incredibly hype. Just like Perfect Chaos, it's rather easy and heavily focused on the cinematic flair than anything else, but it works as a finale of the story. All in all, I personally see Sonic Adventure 2 as a bit of a downgrade to Sonic Adventure 1. I just prefer the way the game is structured in that game, but don't get me wrong, this game is almost just as good. Definitely a worthy successor to the previous game. This is the first game I played in my Sonic Marathon to prepare myself for Shadow Generations, and I'm really happy and satisfied to have finally played it. Sonic Heroes is a spiritual continuation of the adventure games. It reintroduces the Chaotix team, brings Scream the Rabbit into the mainline games, and first introduces Omega 123, all fan favorite characters. But the gameplay of Sonic Heroes is a very mixed bag. The idea of playing 3 characters with unique abilities at once is great, but that's all I really can say about it. This game is incredibly jank, and not the fun silly jank of the adventure games, no, the infuriating annoying kind of jank. Also, it's not really a game you'd want out of Sonic, you rarely go very fast. It's more of an action platformer that focuses on fighting hordes of enemies, and if you do go fast, expect to fall from or through the geometry many times. And for a game that so heavily focuses on fighting enemies, the fighting system isn't very engaging. It mostly consists of spamming the 1 or 2 attacks that each character has until the enemies drop dead. Same goes for the boss fights. Most of them are either way too easy or simple enemy gauntlets, which is quite disappointing. The two final boss against Metal Overlord is pretty cool though. Again in this game you have multiple teams and multiple campaigns that together tell the whole of one story. Or so it seems, because Sonic Heroes barely tells a story. Yes, the teams all have individual motivations to go on their quests, but you go through large chunks of the game without any cutscenes. Outside of the opening and ending scene of each story, there isn't really much in between. It all only really comes together in the final story, which probably is the best part of the game for me. The levels of all 4 teams are exactly the same with only minor variations between them, so to complete the game you basically have to play through the same 14 levels 4 times over. This game was a huge disappointment for me. I never really heard many people criticize it very much, but this was, in my opinion, the worst 3D Sonic game until now. Shadow the Hedgehog is a game that marks the height of the edgy phase of the franchise, and I gotta say, it's not that bad. Gameplay wise it plays very similar to Sonic Adventure 2's Shadow stages, but with pickable? I don't know, something like that, weapons. And that the levels have different objectives, like simply reaching the goal, or alternatively defeating all enemies, collecting X amount of collectibles, and so on. Depending on which objectives you accomplish, you will go through different storylines and receive different endings. You learn different things about the past and the characters and different stories, so it's important to play all of them. I didn't do that. Yeah, I'm not gonna play through this game more than I need to. It was fun while it lasted, but 2 hours is enough. I did play the final boss though, which is cinematic. This game is the 3rd game in Shadow's story that started in Adventure 2 and continues in Heroes. It's about a demonic alien race called the Black Arms invading Earth. Also the leader is Shadow's genetic father or something, I don't know, they blow up the government in one story. Shadow just straight up kills Eggman in another, I don't know, this game is bonkers. Yeah, Shadow with a Glock is a sight to behold, but in the actual game it doesn't actually feel that crazy. They feel more like blasters in a Lego game than actual weapons. In the end, the game is alright. Maybe I'll continue some other time, but for now, 1 playthrough is enough. Playing this game 9 more times sounds more like torture than anything else. Sonic Colors is a fan favorite, a game so beloved that it even got a re-release on a modern platform. Its biggest strength is how fun the levels actually are. It's technically a game with the boost formula from Unleashed, but made most of the levels 2D again, which isn't technically bad. They play really well and the game as a whole is really fun. There's distinctive zones that look absolutely stunning and feature banger soundtracks. Tropical Resort, Starlight Carnival and Terminal Velocity are all just really cool set pieces. My problem with them is that most of the levels rarely last longer than 2 minutes, and the whole game can be completed in about 2 or 3 hours. Sonic Colors introduces the Wisps. When you pick one up, you gain a different ability, like power-ups from Mario. They can be pace-breaking at times, but the game is designed with them in mind, so it's not that distracting. They work well in this game and can be quite fun. I don't know if they need it to be a mainstay of the franchise from this point on forward though. This game also marks the beginning of Ken Pontek as head writer, and it's not my type of humor. Some lines could get a smirk out of me, but more often than not it's an ironic one at best. From this point on forward it's also a noticeably different direction for the story team. I don't know if this was Pontek's decision or Sonic Team's, but as long as he is head writer for the franchise, it's very noticeably dumbed down in comparison to previous games, whose stories, as crazy as they could get, I usually adored. The story of Colors can be summed up as Eggman catches animals and Sonic doesn't like that and stops him, but in space. It's the same story as Sonic 1 except in space, there isn't much to it at all. It's just, so many aspects of this game could have been so much more. The boss fights are not interesting at all except for the final boss, which also dies just as I feel like it gets started. Considering how beloved this game is, I was really expecting more from it. It's fun for what it is, but it's over in like 3 hours and has a few too many shortcomings for my liking. It's certainly one of the higher quality Sonic games and very much worth playing. Just don't let your expectations hype up the experience too much. Sonic Lost World was the grand continuation of the Sonic franchise after the masterpiece that was Sonic Generations, and it decided to give us this. A game that has issues from beginning to end, like where do I even begin? The game has 7 worlds with 4 levels each. The worlds have NSMB style bland-ass themes and the levels are largely forgettable. The game constantly switches between 3D and 2D as most modern Sonic games do. The 3D gameplay atop the cylindrical planets that feel more stripped out of Super Mario Galaxy than anything else is fine majority of the time. However, in 2D, Sonic feels incredibly heavy and slow. Also, the wisps are back for no in-universe reason. They're still in capsules, even though the whole point of Sonic Colors is that they're captured in them because Eggman put them in here. But in this game, they're just kind of here for no reason. I think Sonic Team just wanted to have these power-ups back, but they feel very shoehorned in. Also, their capsules don't break if you just run into them, so you always have to stop and manually break them, which sounds like a minor gripe, but trust me, play it yourself and you'll notice how annoying this is. The new characters, the Deadly Six or the Zeti, have bare bones stereotypical personalities that even make the Koopa links look interesting, with boss encounters that rarely last longer than 20 seconds. The story is also really bland, with nothing really happening, and when something happens, it doesn't have any consequences. The final boss is also an exact copy of the final boss from Sonic Colors, and it's the best part of the game. Even the soundtrack, which is usually never a disappointment in the Sonic franchise, is pretty bland and didn't leave a single song stuck in my mind, except for the Zeti's leitmotif, I suppose. Sonic Lost World is a huge step down from the boost formula that we had previously. Even though Generations gathered huge acclaim, they made this game more basic and simplified, which is more of a detriment than a positive. It just ended up bland and not very Sonic-like. And this one too dies quicker than you'd like it to. I mean, yeah, it took me a couple of tries to even get to this point, but you'd think it would ramp up more and more. But once he gets started, making his attacks more... Oh, I didn't even want to do that. Okay, you know what? Credits. God, what an abysmal game. What is there to say about Sonic Mania that hasn't already been said? It's a masterpiece of 2D jump runs with bombastic visuals and music, tight gameplay and physics, and charm and fanservice galore. It's a fantastic game, probably one of the objectively best Sonic video games, but I do have a few gripes with it that aren't talked about all too often. First off, the new zones, Studiopolis, Press Garden and Mirage Saloon, all incredibly fun and totally original. I do find the final zone, Titanic Monarch, to be a bit of a low point at the end of the game. It's very convoluted and not visually appealing, but it's alright. The other 8 zones are recurring from Sonic 1 through 3. They're heavily remixed and have new gimmicks, but you can't deny that running around in the same old aesthetics feels a bit derivative. They're fun as ever and arguably better than the originals. I just would have wished for there to be more original themes. Most of the boss fights are also largely nothing special. All in all, a lot more forgettable than the bosses from the previous 2D Sonic games in my opinion. The hardboiled heavies are pretty cool visually, but there isn't much to their story or characters. Oh yeah, the story. 5 Acrobos find the Phantom Ruby in the exact same location that Sonic 3 starts in. They become individuals. Robotnik uses the Phantom Ruby to warp you all over the place and plan to use it to, I don't know, conquer the world or something. And in the end you defeat him and get sucked through a portal to God knows where. Oh, and the true final boss zone, Egg Reverie, is also a step down from Sonic 3's Doomsday Zone. But hey, these are minor gripes and an all in all 9 out of 10 experience at least. If I were to try to introduce someone to Sonic, Sonic Mania is the game I'd do it with. This game, however, is on the complete other side of the spectrum. This game reeks. There probably isn't much I could say about this game that hasn't already been said before. Where do I even begin? The story, the gameplay, the characterizations, tone, script, level design, there's just so much to talk about. Let's start with classic Sonic's mere presence, because as it turns out, the portal Sonic gets pulled through at the end of Sonic Mania leads him straight into this game, to do absolutely nothing. Why is he even here? He doesn't do anything in the story, plays awfully, and barely has a reason to be here. Oh, and speaking of the story, this game asks the question, what if Dr. Eggman won and took over the world? The answer, absolutely nothing about the world changes visually and we win the world back in about 60 minutes of gameplay. Yeah, that's right, Sonic Forces is set during a time of war. But none of the characters or the world at large seem greatly affected. Eggman has one base of operations, one big metropolitan city, the Death Egg and the chemical plant. Just like in Sonic 2. Or most other games for that matter. Sonic Heroes, Adventure, Eggman always had multiple larger facilities and bases to call his own, and Forces doesn't bother to show us what else he has done now that he's achieved world domination. Arguably you get a better sense of a unified Eggman empire in Eggman Land of Sonic Unleashed. Same with the characters, they talk about Sonic being tortured for months on end, but Sonic acts all jolly and sarcastic as always anyway. Tails is a complete wimp who can't do anything on his own, even though he has gone through the arc of standing up and believing in himself multiple times now. Omega's once shown broken and Tails isn't able to fix him, but he inexplicably shows up at the finale as this grand heroic cavalry moment anyway. We never get to see the war that we are being told is raging all across the planet except for the finale, which is just a couple of copied and pasted avatars in the background fighting a bunch of copied Zavox and Shadows and Chaoses. Alright, that brings us to the Avatar and Infinite. Two new characters that barely add anything to the game. The Avatar, the third playable character and new recruit in the Resistance, plays exactly like modern Sonic, except it has a totally OP weapon. And Infinite is a complete edgelord that can create illusions with the Phantom movie from Sonic Mania, who has a god complex after Shadow called him ugly or something, I don't know. Regarding the gameplay, there are three gameplay styles, Classic, Modern and the Avatar. Classic Sonic levels are as you expect, except that he plays abhorrent now for some reason. Modern and Avatar are basically the same, except that you can boost through 90% of the game and finish most of the levels in less than 2 minutes. It's absolutely mind-numbing, not bad per se, but boring and tiresome. The bosses are few numbers and Infinite's final fight is just Metal Sonic's boss fight again, and the final boss is just a nigger with armor for the third time. There's probably more elements that you could criticize about this game, but you name it, it's probably bad. The thing is, this game is not the kind of bad that I get actively angry at like Heroes or get bored to death with like Lost World. No, it's just the kind of bad where you can do nothing but get baffled by literally every single creative decision they made while making this game. I'm just sorry the IDW comic series had to pick up from this. Go read it by the way, it's great. Sonic Frontiers is a special one. After the mostly bad decade that was the 2010s, Sonic Team really locked in with this one. Unlike any Sonic game before, this is an open world experience, with multiple huge islands to run across, a ton of collectibles and stuff to do, an actual story again for once. Most importantly, for the most part the normal gameplay is absurdly fun. Just running across the world, jumping through the platform challenges feels great, and the combat, while not being super intricate, has a nice learning curve that actually makes you feel accomplished once you get good at it. There's normal enemies which aren't too much of a struggle, mini bosses which are fine most of the time with a few that take forever to fight to the point of annoyance, and 4 big main boss fights. These are sick and clear highlights, except for the Wyvern. The Wyvern sucks, with some outrageously intense over the top metal music. This game also has a story again for once, that introduces a bunch of things to the lore, like the Chaos Emeralds being from space, these beings that are just called the Ancients that are somehow related to Chaos, Eggman creating this AI interface called Sage that he slowly starts to see as his own daughter. Eggman's and Sage's story and characterizations are some of my personal highlights. They're surprisingly deep and emotional. They also treat Amy, Knuckles and Tails with some moments of actual insight and the developments throughout the series. They also name drop a whole bunch of other characters and events from throughout the franchise, which can get a bit much and fanservy sometimes, especially since this is quite unusual for Sonic games to have a continuity nowadays, but it's nice that they acknowledge stuff like Tails' struggle with heroism and moments of cowardice. While the core gameplay is great, the game really struggles in many other aspects. As fun as the platforming is, all the geometry is just kind of floating there. Not a huge issue though, because you won't be able to see it most of the time when you're 5 steps away. And yeah, floating geometry isn't the worst offense in the world, since most other Sonic games have it too, but it really stands out here since most of the game doesn't really look very Sonic-like. All the main islands just kind of look like standard Unity maps or something. To compensate for the new gameplay style and look, there's also these cyberspace levels that are more akin to the boost formula. These suck! The way Sonic plays in this game is not like in the boost games at all, so they feel a lot more clunky than they should. This also wouldn't be a problem if the levels were designed around Sonic's new playstyle, but many of them are straight ripped from Sonic's generations, so they aren't. There's also only Green Hill, Chemical Plant and Sky Sanctuary, and very late into the game they also have Speed Highway, which are all assets from Sonic's generations. If they were just gonna reuse those, why not at least take more of them? One of the collectibles you can find is also reused from past games. The music pieces. You can listen to a mix of some of the best Sonic OSTs while blasting through this game, and I'm not gonna lie, this is pretty sick. Frontier's OST itself is already pretty good, but this is just a great feature. Also there's this mandatory pinball machine, which is one of the worst moments in the franchise. This thing sucks. And finally we have Sonic Superstars, the most recent mainline game in the Sonic franchise. A 2.5D game and the newest game in the classic era. Although the presentation is nice enough, it is quite safe and bland. I usually prefer more colorful and expressive sprite art in 2D games, like in Sonic Mania. But in comparison to Sonic Mania, this game falls flat in most every other way as well. Even though the gameplay itself is fun for what it is, most of the zones are forgettable and have nothing interesting to show off. Except for Cyber Station, a zone in which everything is voxelized, and the final zone like Fortress, in which there's a really cool plot twist in the second act. The boss fights for the most part were also really bad and forgettable, except for 2 fights that really stand out, one positively, one negatively. The boss fight against Fang at the end of Golden Capital is ridiculously annoying. It's an auto-scrolling boss fight with these segments where you don't even fight him, you just evade flamethrowers, and it takes forever. If you die once, you have to do this thing again for minutes on end. But regarding the boss fight that stood out positively, I've complained how the final bosses in Sonic games are usually more cinematic than an actual challenge, and sometimes that is fine for the finale of a story, but I did wish for them to be a bit difficult and longer. Well, I have to wish no more because this final boss of the game is tough. It gets a lot of hate for being way too long and difficult, but I disagree. His attack patterns are perfectly learnable and he really isn't that long once you figure him out. It took me almost an hour to beat him, but I really felt accomplished at the end. Also, it did make it more stressful for me than it really needed to be, because the boss starts the same time as the level itself. I arrived there with only 5 minutes left, so I assumed I had to beat him within that time. Turns out, you don't. If the clock strikes 0, nothing happens. So I learned the boss and how to do him basically perfectly for no reason. Apparently speedrunners skip this boss fight because it takes too long, so I suppose I'm basically the best possible player at this particular boss in the world, so let's go. None of the music really stands out either. Usually a high point in Sonic games, this is the first game where I can't think of a single piece of memorable music. There's also these chaos powers you unlock when getting the Chaos Emeralds. Some of them I kind of forgot I even had, but the more traversal oriented ones were a great help and made it very easy to achieve some segments. The special stages you get the Chaos Emeralds from suck though. Basically this game is 80% mid, 10% outright bad and 10% peak. So not exactly the best ratio I suppose. So there you have it, a complete summary of my thoughts and opinions on the whole entire Sonic franchise without exception. Even after many ups and downs, at the end of the day I still love this franchise and even found a few new favorite entries. If you care for my extended thoughts on any particular game, you can find a playlist of my Sonic playthroughs here. I always talk about my feelings towards a game during the credits, so check those out if you're interested in anything in particular. Obviously there's a few more Sonic games in the series, but most of those are deemed not important or interesting enough for me to talk about in this video. Some other ones I simply wasn't able to play yet, but I wanted to bring this video up before Shadow Generations releases. So maybe I'll play another batch of Sonic games some other time in Maker Part 2. After all, I'm just really excited for Shadow Generations coming out tomorrow, and Sonic the Movie 3 releasing later this year. I'll be streaming Shadow Generations on my Twitch, so drop by if you're interested. I hope you could get something out of this, maybe some of you learned something new about the Sonic franchise, or at least you got entertained. Let me know what you thought of this video and if you want a part 2. But either way, I hope you could enjoy it. Thank you for watching, and until next time.